Hello everybody, and welcome back aboard the good ship Kyle. Today I'm here to ask, what if we're doing this whole UAP UFO thing wrong? If you're waiting for the government to tell you what they are, well, these things have been reported since at least the 1940s, if not earlier, so how long do we have to wait for the government to tell us? But there's another option, and bear with me here. It's a little bit out there, but hear me out. I'm going to do my best to make my argument. What if the aliens and the government, or whatever the UAP are, what if they're all waiting for the same thing we are? And that's for us to choose what they are. I know it sounds crazy and you're probably already closing the video, but stick with me. I'm going to do my best to explain why this makes sense. And it all starts with this lovely picture here of Schrödinger's cat, okay? So Schrödinger's cat is Erwin Schrödinger's thought experiment that illustrates quantum supposition. Quantum supposition means that every quantum state can be represented as a sum of two or more other distinct values. The basic idea here, if you're not familiar with Schrödinger's cat, is you have a cat in the box. You don't know if it's alive or dead until you open the box. So until you open the box, it's both alive and dead. Once you open the box, you determine the state of the cat, and therefore you observe the state that you observe, and that's now the reality you live in. What happens to the dead cat? Well, we'll talk about that later on in this video. So here's what I'm going to try to ask to the best of my ability in this video. Right now, we don't know the outcome of the UAP. We have no definitive answer. If the UAP is like a Schrödinger's cat, then, and according to quantum supposition, these UAP could potentially exist in a quantum state where it's a sum of two or more other distinct states, where there's a reality where there's a normal, non-alien, non-extra normal, completely reasonable explanation, like the Neil deGrasse Tyson type explanations. Maybe it's a fault of the equipment that we use to observe these things. You know, eyewitnesses can't always be trusted. There's a whole psychology aspect to that. There's another timeline where we find out that it's all a government plot or scheme or whatever. There's another timeline potentially where it is a hostile takeover. How many potential timelines are there? We don't really know. But right now, we're at that exciting stage where we don't know. And so, it's possible that all of the potential outcomes exist, and we haven't chosen which timeline we're a part of yet. So, all of this stuff, I mean, these are the most, both of these examples are the most basic examples of quantum mechanics. First, you have Schrödinger's cat. The cat's both dead and alive until you find out, and then you go to the timeline where the cat's alive. We'll get to that in a second. Another example of this is the famous double slit experiment, where basically you can send, they've tried this with a few things, but you could send electrons. Here in this picture you see, there's an electron beam gun. So let me paraphrase from this BBC article from Philip Ball. The title is The Strange Link Between the Human Mind and Quantum Physics. I'm just going to mention some notes here that I took down. So quantum mechanics is the best theory we have for describing the world at the nuts and bolts level of atoms and subatomic particles. Perhaps the most renowned of its mysteries is the fact that the outcome of a quantum experiment can change depending on whether or not we choose to measure some property of the particles involved. When this observer effect was first noticed by the early pioneers of quantum theory, they were deeply troubled. It seemed to undermine the basic assumption behind all science, that there is an objective world out there, irrespective of us. If the way the world behaves depends on how or if we look at it, what can reality really mean? The most famous intrusion of the mind into quantum mechanics comes from the double slit experiment. So let's go back to our picture here. This is the double slit experiment. Imagine shining a beam of light at a screen that contains two closely spaced parallel slits. Some of the light passes through the slits, whereupon it strikes another screen. Light can be thought of as a kind of wave, and when waves emerge from two slits like this, they can interfere with each other. If their peaks coincide, they reinforce each other, whereas if a peak and a trough coincide, they cancel out. This wave interference is called diffraction, and it produces a series of alternating bright and dark stripes on the back screen, where the light waves are either reinforced or canceled out. The implication seems to be that each particle passes simultaneously through both slits and interferes with itself. This combination of both paths at once is known as a superposition state. But here's the odd thing. If we place a detector inside or just behind one slit, we can find out whether any given particle goes through it or not. In that case, however, the interference vanishes simply by observing a particle's path. Even if that observation should not disturb the particle's motion, we change the outcome. It is as if nature knows, not just if we are looking, but if we are planning to look. So that last bullet point there in the article talks about later on this experiment was expanded to take into account of, okay, what if we could not know the result at the end, but somehow track backwards and find out the result through some other method? And basically the results were the same, where even if you measured it after the fact, if you came up with some special way of doing that, then this observer effect still happened. So what is this effect of consciousness on reality, apparently, on quantum mechanics? One of the best theories we have, as far as I know, here's a Nature article, which is written by Robert Crease. He's talking about Sean Carroll's book about the many worlds theory. Sean Carroll's book is Something Deeply Hidden, Quantum Worlds and the Emergence of Space-Time. So there have been lots of efforts to try to explain this event in a way that makes any kind of sense with how we understand the world. And I think an interesting one that Dr. Sean Carroll introduced me to is, I'm just going to read from this Nature post because, look, I'm not a physicist. I don't have a degree in that kind of STEM. Technically, I have a STEM degree, but not that kind. So what I want to do here is start a conversation and say, hey, maybe there's something to this. Maybe we can do something here. So catch a wave. From Nature. Quantum mechanics is the basic framework of modern subatomic physics. It has successfully withstood almost a century of tests, including French physicist Alain Aspect's experiments confirming entanglement, or action at a distance between certain types of quantum phenomena. In quantum mechanics, the world unfolds through a combination of two basic ingredients. One, a smooth, fully deterministic wave function, a mathematical expression that conveys information about a particle in the form of numerous possibilities for its location and characteristics. This wave function. The second is something that realizes one of those possibilities and eliminates all the others. Opinions differ about how that happens, but it might be caused by observation of the wave function or by wave function encountering some part of the classical world. Many physicists accept this picture at face value in a conceptual kludge known as the Copenhagen interpretation, authored by Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg in the 1920s. But the Copenhagen approach is difficult to swallow for several reasons. Among them is the fact that the wave function is unobservable. The predictions are probabilistic, and what makes the function collapse is mysterious. So either things behave according to this smooth, deterministic wave function, or they don't. And that's the explanation that we have. This is a problem that Einstein couldn't really solve. So what are we to make of that collapsing wave? The equations work, But what the wave function is the key source of contention in interpreting quantum mechanics. Carroll outlines several alternatives to the Copenhagen interpretation, along with their advantages and disadvantages. One option is a hidden variable approach, championed by Albert Einstein and David Bohm, among others, basically stating that the wave function is just a temporary fix and that physicists will eventually replace it. Another tack, named quantum Bayesianism or cubism by Christopher Fuchs, regards the wave function as essentially subjective. Thus, it is merely a guide to what we should believe about the outcome of measurements, rather than a name for a real feature of the subatomic world. Late in his life, Heisenberg proposed that we have to change our notion of reality itself, reaching back to a concept developed by Aristotle. Potency is in an acorn's potential to become an oak tree, given the right context. He suggested that what the wave function represents is an intermediate level of reality. Carroll argues that the many worlds theory is the most straightforward approach to understanding quantum mechanics. It accepts the reality of the wave function. In fact, it says that there is one wave function and only one for the entire universe. Further, it states that when an event happens in our world, the other possibilities contained in the wave function do not go away. Instead, new worlds are created in which each possibility is a reality. The theory's sheer simplicity and logic within the conceptual framework of quantum mechanics inspire Carroll to call it the courageous approach. Don't worry about those extra worlds, he asserts. We can't see them, and if the many worlds theory is true, we won't notice the difference. The only other worlds are parallel to our own, but so hidden from it that they might as well be populated by ghosts, quote unquote. Now, there are certain other theories I was reading about which are newer and more controversial, that maybe these multiple worlds do affect each other in certain ways. But that's a whole nother conversation. The idea here that I want to try to lay out as a possibility is, well, we're at this stage with UFOs, UAP. We don't know what they are. That's a state of potential, like the acorn that Aristotle talked about. There are a few paths that we could take based on what we learn or what we decide or what the outcome is. All possible paths of finding out what UAP are exist. It's up to us to ultimately, based on what we discover together, what we learn, it's up to us to choose which path we take. Now, here's where things get a little bit crazy. If you've listened this far, thank you. I think there's something to this. Could we somehow come together, make a decision, and affect the outcome of what the UAP are? Could we somehow decide what they are? Either through what we've observed, by poring over the data, even though a lot of it doesn't make sense, and we say, okay, here's what we can all agree on. Let's pick these things, and we're going to decide because these will be good for humanity. Let's pick these and become better together. Let's pick the timeline we want, not the one where there's a cataclysm or an invasion from some force that we can't defeat. Not the timeline where we keep fighting over these trivial things. Maybe this will open us up to a timeline that's better and more exciting than any timeline we've ever been a part of in our history. Okay, so buckle up, because it's about to get just a little bit weirder. You're probably gone by now, but if you're still here, let's just say these reports of ETs being able to communicate telepathically are true. Maybe some of you feel you've experienced this. There's no material, irrefutable proof, of course, but other than that, people claim that it happened. If that's true, and let's say if we did somehow get some kind of a proof that this telepathy between ETs and aliens did exist. I know we're totally out there in no man's land now, but let's just say that happens. Now, you might think that's scary that these ETs can read our minds and we can read theirs, but it could also be exciting because it shows that if there's no additional hardware, somehow humanity is wired for telepathy. If we all just agreed, okay, we have this telepathic ability. It's been demonstrated here, here, and here. Let's all agree that we have it, and let's figure out how to use it, and let's come together to solve this problem. Maybe these UAP can be a catalyst to us deciding what's true about them and how it applies to humanity, and turning around and using it to pick our desired timeline. Now, that's where things get a little bit mumbo-jumbo-y, I understand. But the basic idea of there's multiple parallel worlds, whenever a different potential outcome happens, an easier way to describe this is rolling dice. Before you roll the dice, there's a different timeline or a different parallel world for every potential outcome of those dice. And you go along your merry way on that new timeline without even realizing that all the other ones also exist. The sheer scale of that is it really boggles the mind if you really apply it on a larger scale of every single potentiality having its own separate parallel world. It really boggles the mind. So I understand that this is a difficult thing to accept. And I am in no way saying that this is a fact at this point. But I think there could be something there. If we look at this UAP data and we say, okay, well, here's all these various scattered differing ideas of what it might be, they don't line up. What if we just pick one, pick the best one, and we all believe it? And we end up in the timeline where the best option was the answer. It sounds like mumbo jumbo, but really it's not that unusual. If we had a way to know how to pick the living cat, we probably all would. So that's the idea. That's as far as I am along with it right now. Wouldn't it be amazing if we all came together as humanity, put aside our differences, stop disagreeing, stop fighting each other, learn to trust each other somehow, and we came together with the answer. Instead of waiting for it to be delivered to us, we delivered the answer, and the answer was a brighter future that unlocks interstellar travel only dreamed of before, unlocks a more open and united humanity, potentially with telepathic powers. Come on. If that doesn't at least get you interested as a thought experiment, something is dead inside of you. Come on, let's talk about this stuff. So, that's my theory. Again, I don't have any degrees in physics or astronomy or anything like that. So if somebody sees this and you do, and you take issue with any of the technical aspects of my theory, I highly encourage you to share your concerns and the flaws that may exist in the theory, because I think it's an interesting one and it deserves scrutiny and it deserves to be held to a higher standard beyond just scoffing at it. Because even if there's a small chance that humanity could come together and do something like this, I think it's worth looking into. So thank you for watching this video, and I will see you next time on The Good Ship Kyle. Bye, everybody.